In this tutorial, we are creating an interactive object that can spawn items. First, create a script called interactive chest. Open the script. Now, create a serialized field, key code variable called interactive button. Also, add a private Boolean variable called player is near. Next, make an if statement inside the update function. We will check if the player is near, and if the player presses down the key that is assigned for the interactive button variable. For now, we will just add a debug. Next, create an onCollisionEnter function. Here, we will check if the player collided with the object that is holding this script. If this is true, then the variable player is near should be true. Also create an onCollisionExit to check if the player stops colliding with the object. Simply copy the if statement from the onCollisionEnter. But this time player is near should be false. Delete lines that we don't need right now. Here I made a simple scene, with a player and a cube, named chest. On the cube, assign the interactive chest script. And assign a key, for the interactive button variable. I will choose the F key. Also, assign a player tag to the player. Now, let's test. Collide with the chest, and press the F key, or whatever key you choose. A message should show up in your console window. Next, let's add a text above our chest object. I will use TextMesh Pro, and import TMP Essentials. You can also use the legacy text if you want. Select the canvas object and find render mode, under the canvas component. Change screen space overlay into world space. Width and height should be equal to 2. Change the value of position X and Y, to 0. Center all alignments. Change the anchor preset of the text, to stretch. And font size to 1. Move the canvas up, by changing the position Y. I think 1.5 is good enough height. Change the text input to blank or the key you choose. We will change the text, depending on the value of the interactive button variable later, in our code. Change the name of the text object. Now back to our script. Create a serialized field variable. This is going to be a TextMesh Pro UGUI. A new namespace, using TM Pro should appear on top of your script. If not, make sure to type it manually. On the CollisionEnter, let's change the value of our interact text, equal to the interactive button. Also in the CollisionExit, interact text should be empty. Let's test if our interact text. First, select the chest object. In the inspector, assign the interact text to the interactive chest script. Now, we can test. The interact text appears whenever we collide. Next, we want to do something every time we interact with our object. What we will do is spawn objects when we press the interact button. Back in the script, we will create a serialized field array game object, called item to spawn. In the update function, inside the if statement, add a for loop statement, where the length of the item to spawn is the limit of our loop. Inside the loop, we will enable the objects assigned in the item to spawn array. After that, we will also reposition all the objects to where the chest is. Add a little in the y-axis, so the object spawns on top of the chest. Back to Unity, create an empty game object called item to spawn. Add some objects inside. Select the chest object, and lock the inspector. This way we can assign multiple objects in the array variable. Now, select all the objects that we created a while ago, and drag and drop them in the item to spawn array variable. Now, let's test our game. As you can see, it is working. If you want, you can also add a rigid body to these objects, to add some effect when they spawn. Great, we have created an interactive object in Unity. If you want, you can also use instantiate, instead of enabling objects. Back in the script, comment out our preview code. And instead, we will instantiate our item to spawn array. Copy the vector3 value from the previews code, and don't forget the transform.rotation. Back to Unity, select the chest object, and assign a prefab to spawn. Here I pre-made a prefab, which is just a simple sphere, with a collider and rigid body. Drag and drop the prefab to the item to spawn array. You can have as many as you want. In this example, I will only use 2. Next, let's try and make the items disappear when colliding with the player. First, create another script called collectible. Remove all the code inside the class. Next, add an onCollisionEnter function and check if the player collided with the collectible. If this is true, then we can either disable or destroy this object. I suggest using disable, but if for some reason you need to use destroy, then you can go ahead and use it. Also, in the interactive chest, I will use the enable method instead of instantiate. Now, back to Unity, select your items, and add the collectible script. Reassign objects to the item to spawn. If nothing is spawning, try adding more to the y-axis of the item to spawn. Now, let's test it again. Next, we will check if the chest is already open. Back to the interactive chest script, add another private variable called opened. First, in the collision enter function, we will add another if statement to check if the opened variable is false. If the player presses the interactive button, then the opened variable should be true. Also, player is near variable should be false. Lastly, we will add a simple animation. Select the chest object, and on the animation window, click Create to create an animation. Save this animation clip in a folder. I will name this open_chest. Select the animation state, and then click the motion file. On the project window, the animation clip should pop up. Select the open_chest clip, and in the inspector uncheck loop time. Next, create an empty state. Right-click on the new empty state, and set it as the layer default state. Also, rename it to idle. Right-click on the idle state, and select Make Transition. Then click the Open Chest state, to connect these two animation states. Next, on the top left of the Animator tab, you should see the Parameters tab. There should be a plus sign on the right side of it. Click on that and choose Trigger. Name it Open. Select the transition arrow, and on the inspector, add a condition and choose the parameter that we just created. Also above that, uncheck has exit time, fixed duration, and change the value of transition duration to 0. Finally, let's do the animation. Select the chest object, and click the red button on the animation window. I will just create a simple animation, where I will change the scale of the chest. Next, go back to the interactive chest script, and add a private animator variable called anim. Create a start function, and get the object's animator component. In the update function, under the player is near, and input if statement, call the animation trigger parameter called open. And we are done. If you run the game, you will that the animation is triggered. And that is all. Thank you for watching.